Welcome to Ask the Expert, an award-winning daily series from 8:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. to help small businesses. If you have any questions today, pop those in the comments of the live feed. And if you do need any more advice, be sure to join the Intuit QuickBooks official SMB community group on Facebook, where you've got accountants and business experts on hand 24/7. Now, during the live session, there will be a poll, so please do engage with that, and I'll be revealing the results at the end. And an exciting one, if you are on TikTok, check out the Be Your Own Boss competition. You can pitch a new business idea and you could win investment, mentorship, and business advice to turn it into a reality. Tag hashtag Be Your Own Boss to enter. So welcome to today's Ask the Expert. I'm Jenna and I'm excited because I have the pleasure of taking you through the next half an hour, talking all things regaining our confidence when we're pitching our businesses, especially as we're starting to venture into in-person meetings with prospective clients, for example, in-person meetings. So that's what we're focusing on today. Now, I run a training and coaching business called the IAM Hub. It's focused on supporting clients to communicate with more confidence and impact. And I work with small business owners primarily, as well as working with entrepreneurs as a pitch coach. And I always say it's my background in broadcast journalism where I pinpoint where I found my passion for public speaking. There is such a thing, apparently, but I've really been able to enjoy and had been fortunate to experience quite a varied career path up to now that's always had this common theme of supporting others to find their voice and maximize it for business and career success. And I always say that there's a powerful voice in everyone. We've all got a powerful voice, but it's about unlocking that to really reap the benefits in your business and your career. And hopefully there's going to be some little tips that I can go through today before we dive into your questions. So as I say, if you do have any questions, pop those in the comments of the live feed. So as I was building up to today's conversation, it was actually really timely because I had a few conversations recently around the terms confidence and competence. And if we think of confidence as how good we think we are at something and competence with how good we actually are at something, there's quite a worthwhile reflection to be had, especially on that confidence side and where we feel that we are on that confidence line. Excuse me, frog in my throat this morning. And I always use it sort of say the confidence meter. And if you had to sort of pinpoint your level of confidence, especially going into in-person pitches, for example, where might that be? So I imagine you're likely running your own businesses, you're probably freelancing, and you're doing something that you're good at. You've got competence, but it's the confidence piece that can be quite interesting because that's where we get a little bit of a wobble sometimes. And I thought it'd be worth kicking off with just a little bit of a reflection around the last year or so, but also looking ahead to the near future, especially as things are starting to open up again. Clients that I've worked with recently have been especially focused on their confidence to speak up in front of others and sell their businesses confidently as well. And I think the roller coaster of the last year has certainly had an impact, I would say, for most of us in that area, whether that's maybe we've had dips in confidence now and again, maybe it's been a bit of a long-term impact for us. So as we do start to venture towards in-person meetings, maybe it is meeting with clients, maybe more formal pitches, for example, where we are pitching a business to a room full of people, starting to think about, are your confidence levels going up, thinking about that prospect, or is it going down a little bit because it can be quite overwhelming? And given that we've spent over a year now nailing our virtual pitches and pitching to prospective clients and more formally, how do we feel about going into in-person pitches as well? And I'm hoping to give you some tips today that's going to help us snap out of that virtual meeting mode a little bit easier, because there is quite a big difference, especially in the preparation, but also the delivery when we're pitching our businesses as well. So here we go. I've got 5 key tips that I wanted to run through before we dive into questions. And funnily enough, I have them on my mini whiteboard, if you can see this here. Anyone who follows me on LinkedIn will know that I've got a little bit of an obsession with whiteboards. Every Wednesday, you'll see Whiteboard Wednesday. There'll be one coming out today. But this is my mini whiteboard, and you can see the 5 key tips that I'm going to be focusing on today. The first one is around mindset. We're then going to look at dressing for IRL, in real life, a term that I learned far too late this year. We're then going to be talking about using our full body language, talking about small talk as well, before wrapping up with authenticity. And these are the 5 key things that I think for us will just help regain our confidence when we're pitching in person as well. So if we kick off with mindset, and by mindset, I mean being mindset ready. And whenever I work with clients, I talk to them about finding what works for them to get into the mindset, the right mindset for the situation. And I would say it's slightly different when we're preparing for virtual pitches compared to in person as well. So in person, we might remember those days where we have a commute or we travel to a location to meet someone and to have a meeting. How can you use that commute to get into that right mindset? Is it that you jump off the tube or the bus a little bit early, go for a longer walk? Do you listen to some music? Is it exercise earlier in the day that you do? Finding what works for you to get into that right mindset, because confidence is a mindset, don't forget. So we want to try to tap into that as much as possible. The next one that I wanted to cover is dressing for in person. Now, this might sound really obvious, but understandably, over the last year or so, we've focused on our top half. We've had this head and shoulders shot in our meetings. And now that we're venturing in person, we've got our full body language on show. And therefore, we want to be dressing in a way that makes us feel good, because I think what we wear can sometimes impact how we feel. So just giving some effort to when you're thinking of, okay, I'm going to in-person meetings, what type of client am I meeting? Is it a corporate client? Do I need to dress a little bit smarter? What's my comfort zone? And how can I find the balance between being professional, personable, and comfortable? I'd say those are sort of the 3 things to try and hit. And then looking at your full body language. So linked to that, don't forget that we're going from heads and shoulders to people seeing all of us. So we've got an opportunity to use our whole body language for maximum impact when we're pitching our businesses. So thinking about things like mirroring our client, if we're meeting a prospective client, for example, maybe it's an in-person casual conversation over coffee, directing our body language towards them. That mirroring technique is so difficult online. We can't really do that. So this is an opportunity to build that rapport, make use of that in-person meeting as well. And I can't mention body language without talking about eye contact. How difficult has it been for us to try to make eye contact with our camera lens, to try to get that rapport with our person on the screen, whereas we don't have that in person. So it's trying to pick up and naturally being able to make eye contact with a person and get that nod of approval, that nod of, yeah, I'm listening to you, which really is so important. So just giving some thought to using your full body language for maximum impact is going to be really key. The next tip that I wanted to mention was on small talk. I feel like small talk has really been lost on virtual meetings. There's a sort of a really quick catch up, maybe first of all, first few seconds, and then it's diving straight into meeting mode. When we're in person, we've got a much longer opportunity to have that small talk and start building that rapport with our prospective client, with our audience, if it's a more formal pitch that we're doing. So trying to prepare, I would say, some talking points as you would normally do your research on the person that you're meeting, the audience that you're going to be pitching to, and trying to get that as natural as possible when you come across. So some people hate small talk, understandably, but it's just a part of meeting new people, especially new clients. We want to get that rapport going as well. And finally, just a point around authenticity, because whenever we're pitching our business, the key is that we want to come across as natural as possible. And we don't want to cross that line into being too salesy, if you like. So being able to show up as authentically as possible as ourselves is going to be really important to get that rapport going and, again, get that good connection with our clients. So just some thoughts there around, being able to show our passion in person, a little bit more of our body language, thinking about making that small talk and showing up authentically as well. And there's just a couple of a bonus point that I wanted to mention before I dive into questions, and that's to make sure we're following up after our meetings. Online, it's so much easier to come off of a call, dive straight into our emails, send everything that we said that we was going to send to that client or to that person. When we're in person, we're actually going away from a physical space. We might not be going back to the office, back to our home office anytime soon. We might be having other meetings. So just going back to what was your routine when you were doing in-person meetings, making a note of what you said you was going to follow up with and making sure you're doing that as quickly as possible. I think following up is really key. Now, there are obviously different types of pitches that we can do. And I'm going to dive into questions soon because that might be coming up as a question as well, because all of these tips that I'm covering, these are sort of 5 fundamental things that you can apply, whether it's an elevator pitch, whether it's a competition pitch. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs to do their sort of 3-minute competition pitches, or longer term meeting pitches and investment pitches as well. So these are sort of the fundamentals, and you'll adapt it to suit the pitch that you're doing. So here we go. I want to dive into questions now and hopefully be able to go into this regaining confidence to pitch our businesses a little bit more. So Hassan on Facebook Messenger, here we go. I completely feed off energy of who I'm talking to when pitching. It's great for being engaging, but also means I may go off track and get distracted by other conversations. Any advice for keeping on message? This is really key because distractions, and I'd say there's almost more distractions virtually than there are in person. We've got our phones nearby, we've got emails popping up. So when you're in person, there's a really great opportunity to be as present as possible with the person we're with or with the audience that we're speaking to. So really trying to be present. And again, it goes back to the mindset point that I mentioned, to be in the room with that person and focusing on what they've got to say. If you feel that you're going off track, don't carry on just because you've started a new point or you've got distracted. Don't be afraid to sort of say, I'm just going to go back to my main point now because I feel like I'm going off track a little bit, and bring it back. Be honest. And as long as you say it with confidence, that's going to really help as well. So hopefully, Hassan, thank you so much for your question. That helps you as well. Okay, diving into the next one, Nora on Twitter. When a potential client is tight on time and you can't do your full pitch, how do you prioritize the pitch so they get all the key info they need? What a question. So I always suggest, especially when I'm working with business owners or entrepreneurs, to have different types and versions of your pitch. So you'll have your full pitch, but you'll also have a prepared, smaller, shorter pitch as well. And that forces you to think, right, what are the key points that I need to be including in my pitch? And you might have this already, Nora, in terms of having a shorter pitch as well as your full one. We always want to give our full pitch because we think, yes, they get all of the information that they need. However, people are tight on time, and actually the full pitch, sometimes we'll send a full pitch deck via email and trust that they're going to have a look through that. What they want to hear from us in person is often the shorter version and the key parts. So don't worry that you're missing out information. There's always an opportunity, I would say, to follow up and say, I'll send you our full pitch if you've got a pitch deck, for example, or I'll send you our, key information document, so you can kind of follow up with a bit more information if you feel like you're missing something in your shorter pitch. But I think that's a mindset thing as well. So think about, don't feel like you're losing information that you're giving in your pitch. You can always follow up as much as possible. When you're talking about prioritizing what to say, really make sure you're focusing on the benefit for the other person. So if it's a prospective client that you're speaking to, for example, focus on what's the benefit of your product or service for them. That's the key to get through in your pitch. You don't necessarily need to go into loads of different detail. You want to get the hook in there so they understand what value you're bringing to them, how it's going to work, and focus sort of on the main questions that they might be asking. I'm hoping that's given you some tips there, Nora, to work with as well. Okay, let's have a look. Hattie on Instagram. I worry that when I do a pitch, I sound like I'm reading lines, but I do need to go over things to make sure I land brand messaging. How can I loosen up and come off more casual? I feel like this is like a gold dust question, Hattie, because I work with clients who have very different preferences when they're pitching or preparing for presentations. It doesn't have to be a formal pitch. It might be presenting some information. And it's really difficult because I'm going to go back to my classic phrase of finding what works for you. For me, people are quite surprised sometimes when I do think about, what I want to say in a pitch or presentation, but I make sure I've got just some key bullet points that I can talk around so it comes across as naturally as possible. And I'd urge you to try to give that a go and practice before you go into pitch mode and you go into the actual presentation. Just try to practice talking around bullet points rather than, putting that pressure on yourself to read word for word. And the more you do it, the more you'll get used to it, especially if it's brand messaging. You say it to yourself over and over again, and it will just become quite natural as well. So give that a go. I think any communication coach and trainer will talk about the importance of practice, and that's often what's missed when we think, I've got my pitch ready, I've done the content, I'm good to go. And it's not necessarily just what we say, it's how we're presenting our information that really lands with our audience. So do make sure you're taking the time to practice and use that practice time to just have some bullet points in front of you. And don't forget, in person, it's a little bit difficult. Virtually, clients have found it really useful to just be able to pop a little post-it note right next to their camera, maybe put sort of some notes where it looks like you're looking at the camera, but you've got something to look at. And that's a bit of a comfort blanket. When we're talking about in-person pitches, just try to have some bullet point notes, have your notepad in front of you and go from there. You don't want to be reading lines, especially in person. Trust yourself that you know your business more than anyone else. And it's just that passion and that mindset to get into conversation mode rather than it being quite a formal, solid pitch. I feel like I've rambled quite a lot on that question, Hattie, but I'm hoping that gives you a little bit of insight in terms of trying to practice not putting that pressure on reading lines. Annabelle on Facebook Messenger, when it comes to business, I know how powerful a big goal can be. It makes you look ambitious, which is a good thing, but also you want to show them that it's achievable. How do you keep the dream big, but the steps to ensure it's manageable? I love that question because I love talking about goal setting. And I did want to sort of squeeze it in today, actually, to try to set yourself goals, not only with your pitching, but with your big goals for your businesses. And absolutely have big goals. I call them hugs, your huge, unique goals. Set your hugs for the year, for the next 6 months of 2021. And I do think that there's something in being ambitious that the person you're pitching to can see that there's ambition and drive and commitment there. But what you want to be doing, like you've just said, is trying to break it down to say, this is the goal, and these are the key milestones leading up to that, because your big goal might not be for another 5 years. It might not be for beyond that as well. So yes, you want it to be achievable. And I think we've all heard of the term SMART goals. I always change sort of achievable and realistic to ambitious and challenging, because I think we're not challenging ourselves enough sometimes. So I think absolutely stick to your ambitions, but just make sure you're highlighting the milestones that show this is how we're going to get there. Not going into minute detail, but this is the dream, this is the big vision, and these are the steps we're going to take to get there. That way, the person you're pitching to, if it's an investor, for example, can see the logic, they can see you've thought about it. You haven't just got your head in the clouds thinking this is the dream and this is what we're going to do. You're actually showing that you've thought about that as well. Okay, Grant on Instagram. I'm often told I'm too modest. I've always thought of this as a good thing, but it could also mean I'm not showing confidence and underselling my business. What should I be doing? Great question. Love this one, because so often, especially business owners and the entrepreneurs that I work with, hold back too much. At the end of the day, confidence doesn't have to veer into being cocky. And I kind of make sure we've got that balance. Confidence, as I said at the start, is how good we think we are at something, whereas you've got the competence of how good we actually are. Make sure you're revisiting your progress in your business so you can really take stock of, look how far I've come, look what I'm doing. So you almost realize I've got the competence to do this, I am good at it, and your confidence can start to increase from there. So take some time to reflect, and that reflection piece that I mentioned at the start is really key, just now and again on a regular basis, trying to check in with ourselves on where we're at and where we've come. The other thing, and because the authenticity piece is really important here as well, you don't want to come across sort of over the top confident if that's not your style. But what's key is just putting in some kind of key facts and stats about your business and saying it in a way that conveys confidence. So not using negative language, for example. Sometimes modesty can come over when we say, oh, I just think this, or maybe this might not be right, but let's talk about this. So get rid of any negative language. Start recording yourself on meetings, Grant, I would say. It's a great technique to use to really hear how you're coming across. Because as I said before, it's not what we say, it's how we say it. So if you can start to get your tone of voice and your body language actually conveying that confidence, you're going to go from modest to confident quite quickly if you can start to implement some different changes. So it's not to say go away from your authentic self, still stay true to who you are, but it's just about starting to get some more positive, confident language to be used and showing up with more confidence. And I'd say it's a mindset to work on there as well. But it's a really great question, because we do unfortunately need to stand out in a crowded market when we're pitching our business, whether we're pitching to different clients who are going to be talking to different service providers, different product providers. We need to be standing out, and it's not to be the loudest person in the room, but we do want to be confident, show that we know our stuff, and be able to deliver on what they're asking for. So I'm hoping with sort of those tips there, that's going to really help as well, Grant. Vanessa on Twitter. Hey Jenna, nerves always get the better of me when I know it's a really important pitch. What can I do to manage the anxiety of it all? If I had £1 for every time I got the question around nerves, it's different for different people. And I know that that's quite a frustrating thing to hear sometimes, that it's working on what works for you, and there's not one size fits all when we talk about managing our nerves. I still get nervous when I pitch something quite big, when I do a big presentation. And again, when I speak to people, they say, yeah, but you're a communication coach, you love public speaking. I love it, but there's still nerves there. And nerves, I always say that nerves come from a place of positivity, because it shows that we care about what we do. And we want to do a good job when we're pitching our business, especially if we're building up to quite a big pitch event. So don't ignore the nerves. Often, I think when we're little, sometimes people say, don't worry, don't be nervous, just ignore those nerves. You go out there and you do your thing. Whereas if we ignore them, they're going to creep up on us and come out somewhere, whether that's through us fiddling, fiddling with our hair, weird body language going on, losing our phrasing, what we want to say. So don't ignore them, but just try to start to change how you're seeing your nerves. That, okay, this is actually a positive thing, because it shows that I care. How can I use this nervous energy more positively? So to bring me more energy, more confidence, more positive energy when I'm pitching. So it's just to start to change our mindset a little bit. And again, finding techniques that work for you in the preparation as well. Is it listening to certain music, going for a run, maybe doing some meditation, reviewing some notes, doing a final practice? And it's going to take sort of practice to work out the preparation routine that works. But whatever it's going to be to get into that confidence mindset, that the nerves are there, it's a good thing, I'm going to channel this to be as confident as I can. And just having some back pocket tips as well when you're going into the pitch. So if you do lose your footing, you do lose your words a little bit, take a sip of water, check your notes, and carry on. Don't feel like we need to kind of trundle through the whole pitch all at once. We can sort of take a breath, take a breather, find our space, and then move on as well. So I'm hoping, Vanessa, that's given you some tips there, but that could be a whole session on its own. Maybe that's the next one in terms of managing nerves. Gio, I hope I've pronounced that correctly on Insta. There must be a sort of rough template of what every pitch needs to land. What are the key things we should cover? My goodness, this is a great one. Again, this could be a whole session on its own. Let's go through the key ones. So when you're delivering quite a formal business pitch, whether that's a short competition pitch, again, I do work with a lot of entrepreneurs who do competition pitches, but then investment pitches. Fundamentally, the sections are the same. It's just how much detail you put in. So always make sure you're letting the audience know what problem you're solving, and obviously then your solution and how it fits into that. So you're almost fitting the puzzle together. Go into a little bit more detail around your product or service, depending on what your business is. And then the other things I'd say to mention is the traction. So the impact that your business has had so far, the customers that you've gained. Traction speaks very loudly on pitches. If you're really early stages in your business, then don't worry if you haven't got loads of traction and loads of sort of stats and testimonials. You can still sort of mention where you're at. But if you've been going for a little while, you've got some traction that you can use to your advantage to tell people about, then absolutely use that as well. And then things like competitors, what's your unique selling point? What makes you stand out from your competitors? Tell us a little bit about your target market and the potential of the market. This goes into more if it's sort of investment or advisors you want to come on board with. Talk about you and your team. If you've got a team or if you're a freelancer, you know, who are you? What's your credibility? And then finally, always end with a call to action. Depending on the type of pitch you're doing, make sure there's some sort of call to action at the end there as well. I do have a guide actually. If you head over to LinkedIn, drop me a message and I can send you a guide, a pitch guide, which goes into much more detail. That's a real whistle-stop tour of some of the key things to include in your pitches, but it does depend on the type of pitch. So it is going to be tailored to the audience and the situation, but that's the fundamentals, I would say, that I'm squeezing in to quite a short space of time. Okay, let's continue on. Dawn on Facebook Messenger. When you don't have an answer to a question, I can tell what the question this is going to be. What's the best way to respond? If you say you don't know, it can look like you're unprepared. Do you know what? Q&As, when we are doing quite a formal pitch, and even if it's not a formal pitch, if it's meeting a prospective client and they're sort of giving us questions and we might not have the answers, preparing for the questions is just as important as preparing for the pitch. I think so often we focus so much on what we want to say in terms of this is our business, this is how it can help you. And we don't think of what questions could they ask us and how can we be prepared. So give as much attention to your pitch and your presentation content as you are to potential questions that could come up. For me, there's a bit, and I sort of, there's a few different options that you've got that doesn't make you look like you don't know what you're doing or you don't have the answers, but you're saying it in a way that's going to come across really credibly. So always acknowledge the question. It's a really great question. And I would say, depending on what they've asked, let them know it's a really great question. I want to make sure I send you the right information, especially if they're asking for statistics, quite in-depth information that you might not have off the top of your head. I want to make sure I give you the right information. So I'll make sure I follow up after our meeting and send those details to you. If that's a plausible thing to be doing, that you just need to do a bit of research and send something to them. The other way to do that is it's kind of like the politician's answer. It's a great question, and let them know what it relates to. It relates to what I was talking about earlier on A, B, and C. And you're kind of tailoring the answer to suit you, if that makes sense. But there's nothing wrong with being quite honest, as long as you say it in a confident way. Great question. I don't have all the details actually at the moment, but I will follow up with you afterwards and send that to you. Said confidently, that's going to land quite well with your audience. They'll accept that as well. So don't blag an answer. That's the biggest tip that I've got. Try not to just think on the spot of, oh my goodness, what am I going to say? Let's go. You'd always rather be honest and follow up rather than blagging an answer there and then. So hopefully that helps. I'm going to try and squeeze in another one. So here we go. Andrea on Twitter. Can you give us an example of the different ways a pitch can adapt for different audiences or purposes? Super quick tips here. Make sure you're researching who your audience are. What level of understanding do they have about your business or the area that you're operating in, the service or product that you've got? And also making sure that you're asking the right questions beforehand. If there's an opportunity in that conversation, that small talk part, try to get a feel then when you're building that rapport of, you know, who they are, what level of knowledge they've got, how you want to kind of pitch and what angle you want to take. But I can't go into too much detail on that one, but I'd say just make sure you're doing your research on your audience. Make sure you're focusing on what's the value that they want from you, what benefit do they want from you there. So if it's an investor, you're tailoring it more to what's the potential. If they are investing in your business, what's the potential and the future potential of your business. If it's a prospective client, it's much more focused on the value you can bring to them as a service provider. So just do your research and tailor it from there. Okay, so that really has been a whistle-stop tour, but hopefully there's some tips there to help with regaining confidence as we pitch our businesses online, but mainly especially if things are opening up and going into in-person as well. But before we do wrap up, the poll results are in. We asked you, do you feel confident about going back to in-person business pitches? 50% of you said yes, amazing, and 50% answered mixed feelings. None of you said no. Really interesting. So no one said no. Everyone is either feeling confident or we've got mixed feelings about it. And I'd say that's about right. I think we can sometimes be quite overwhelmed. We haven't done it for so long. It can be a bit overwhelming, but there's probably that excitement for a lot of us, certainly for me as well, just to get back out there and see people in person rather than via a screen. So really great to get your thoughts. Thank you for engaging with that poll. And really sort of huge thanks for tuning in today. If you do have any questions for me, anything that hasn't been covered, or you do want to connect, then just connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way, Jenna Davies, and I'll be happy to answer any questions for you. But coming up on Ask the Expert tomorrow is Eriona. She is a chartered certified accountant and managing director of Majors Accounts. Tune in to learn how to grow your business using the cloud and get advice on bookkeeping and accounting. A reminder that if you do need any advice, join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. Accountants and business experts are on hand 24/7. And don't forget, if you are on TikTok, do check out the Be Your Own Boss competition. You can pitch a new business, very timely with what we've been talking about today. Pitch a new business and you could win investment, mentorship and business advice. And all you need to do is tag hashtag Be Your Own Boss to enter. I've really enjoyed answering your questions today. Have a great day and see you soon.